One of the pieces of advice I give anybody thinking about franchising is understand what you want out of it if you do it. What do you want out of it? And I understood exactly what I wanted out of it. I wanted one-on-one, face-to-face coaching ability with support. And out of those 13 or so people that said they did that, there were only 2 that did that. Yeah. And Focal Point was one of them.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the latest edition of FranCoach's Franchising 101 podcast. I am Tim Parmeter, founder and CEO of FranCoach and your podcast host. Today, we have another installment of what, frankly, is always my favorite segments of these, which is called In Their Words. And this is where, let's get a little twist on this. Normally, this has been where we have been talking with FranCoach clients who have become franchise owners. But today, we've got a franchise owner that has been a franchise owner for 18 years. I would have loved for him to have been a FranCoach client, but we haven't been around that long. So, but wanted to share his story, his journey, and let people kind of see. We hear from a lot of our clients as they're getting started in that journey. What's it like that far down the road? So, definitely going to hear that story from him when we come back. First, a quick reminder of who we are, and FranCoach is a national search firm dedicated to working with individuals like yourself interested in owning a franchise. We're partnered with over 600 brands spanning 70 different industries. Number one goal, let's properly educate you on franchise ownership to determine if this is a path for you. And if so, what is your absolute best franchise to own? That's a little bit about us. And now coming up, we've got Danny Creed, Focal Point owner of 18 years. Let's hear his story. All right. And it is time now to bring our super duper special guest, not just super, not just duper, but super duper. Joining us today is Mr. Danny Creed. Danny, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tim. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks.
No, I greatly appreciate this, and I know want to get into all your time with Focal Point as an owner. I know you've been there a long time, and super excited here recently to get to meet you because I've heard your name often, and mostly good stuff. Every now and then, that Hartsfield guy, he talks some crap about everybody, but thank you so much for joining us on our humble little show here.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I love these kind of things. And I've heard a lot about you too, but it's all been good.
Oh, Scott hasn't talked any crap on me. So no, that's good. So
I wouldn't tell you if he had. So.
That he's not telling you the truth. So, but I certainly want to, you've been with Focal Point as an owner a long time, but we had quite a journey before this. And I think franchising in particular is a people industry, and really it just should be that way everywhere. But always like to just get to know folks. So give us the scoop on Mr. Danny Dan Coach Creed. Give us the scoop, man.
Mr. Lucky, that's my other nickname. So but there's a whole story behind that. Well, look, thank you. And I'll give you the short version, but I started life as a farmer in southern Kansas. I was raised on a farm in a town of 120 people. My family's still on the farm 130 some years. They settled in the Oklahoma land rush, but I knew I couldn't do that. And with the blessing of my grandfather, I walked off the farm into a radio station, and I spent about 20 years in broadcast. And I had the great opportunity to go from a very small station to the largest country music station in the world. And I got to work with big advertising agencies in New York and Chicago. And I really learned sales. I learned street sales. And in franchising, if we can keep tying it back to that, in franchising, the biggest issue I've ever found with people who buy any kind of franchise is there's 2 or 3, but as you know, but one of them is they don't know how to sell.
Right.
And I had the luck of learning sales from a standpoint of intangible selling, which most people don't understand. And almost everything's an intangible sale today, if you really want to do well with it. And the second thing I learned is just to stay after it. I shared with you in one of our conversations that, you can't call yourself a salesman unless I used to sell radio commercials at $5 a piece. And I got paid straight commission on collections. And I would come home every night and my wife would stand there we had 2 babies in diapers, and she'd say, "What'd you sell today? Because we need food." And so I had to learn how to sell, but it became a passion. And my father died young, and I had to quit college after 2 years, but I had good mentors and angels that came in my life, like Brian Tracy, which I met in 1978 at a positive thinking rally. That's those things used to come through town, and Zig Ziglar and some other people that you wouldn't know the names of, but were very influential in being there and saying, "Go do this, go read this, go, shut up, brush off, once you learn, go do it again."
Right.
And so I had a great opportunity through radio to learn marketing, to learn sales, to learn communication, which is all part of running a business, really. And when it got a little political in the late 80s, I had the opportunity to go into, when broadcasting did, I had an opportunity to go into do a entrepreneurial startup. And I joke that that's, back then we didn't even know how to spell entrepreneur, but I was lucky. I got into one. There was 8 of us, and they came up with, the technical guys came up with ideas that changed the world, and a couple of really cool products. And my job, I never did understand. I still can't tell you the things we discovered, but I knew what it did for people, and that's what they did. They send me out to sell and create ideas and come back from the field and go, "Can it do this?" And they'd go, "Yes, let's do it." Yes. And they'd go start talking all of their technical ease. But I just love that. I was always a sales marketing idea guy for that. I just loved it. And one thing led to another, and it was like, holy cow, this is great. This is exciting. This is dangerous. And I ended up participating in 15 startups. And our job was our plan always on all of them, get it going, get it rolling, sell it, get it rolling, sell it, which, long story short, I'll tell you about getting into coaching, but I'm telling you, it feels like everything in my life from when I was in high school forward was designed for me to do what I ended up doing, and that was being a business coach. And so I did small startups, big startups. I did well-funded startups. I did bootstrap startups, which, as you know, and you've heard of this, and a lot of franchises are. I mean, it's a card table and a telephone in a garage, and figure it out.
Right.
And I did some big ones too. And one of those big ones, I ended up working at the Pentagon and Department of Defense, and I worked specifically with admirals, 5 generals that were important guys. I mean, a couple of them reported to the president. I asked them one time, "Who do you report to?" And they said, "The president." I said, "The president of what?" But they were very influential in a number of admirals and generals that were retired. But these guys were like the Surgeon General of all American forces and things like this. And one of those guys pulled me aside one day in early 2000s and said, "Look, he wanted to become a business coach. And it was a pretty new industry." And he goes, I'm taking classes in New York City because he wanted to coach other admirals and generals as they were leaving to help them understand their value. He goes, "You really ought to look into this because all of your background could be very applicable to this." Right. And one of the things I found, and one of the things I tell anybody who's thinking about buying a franchise of anything, is you really need to make things easier anyway. You need to have an understanding of what an entrepreneur lifestyle is. Because if you don't, you're going to get a big surprise when you don't have people kissing your shoes and, big budgets and, secretaries and marketing and sales department behind you. It's you. And a lot of people struggle. I didn't have that struggle. So anyway, I started, and he said, "You ought to look into this." So I was traveling 230 days a year And I would spend my time in the evenings. Anybody that travels a lot, they're lying to you if they say they don't sit with sweats on in a bed with a laptop open with a TV show and you don't care about,
Right.
and room service just came. If they're telling you anything else, they're lying. They're making it up. So that's what I did. But I started researching the industry. And anyway, again, long story short, I decided I was going to become a business coach. I had 2,000 books. I had connections with Brian and Zig and some of those guys. And I said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to do this because I think I can help a lot of people not make mistakes that other people have made previously. And it just seems, as you know, Tim, I mean, there's a lot of people buy a franchise, they come in and do things the way it's always been done, and they don't learn from anybody else's mistakes.
Right.
And they spend a lot of money and they waste a lot of money.
Right.
So I was working on that in my home. And one day my wife came in and said, there's some franchises that do this. And so at the time, there was about 12 or 13 who said they did it. But
right.
Again, one of the pieces of advice I give anybody thinking about franchising is understand what you want out of it if you do it. What do you want out of it? And I understood exactly what I wanted out of it. I wanted one-on-one, face-to-face coaching ability with support. And out of those 13 or so people that said they did that, there were only 2 that did that.
Yeah.
And Focal Point was one of them. And the funny thing is I made a list of 14 questions, and I was going to ask both of those groups the same. And anybody looking at a franchise, come up with questions and ask everybody the same thing as you do your diligence. But I wore them out. I mean, I'd literally call in the secretary and say, yes, Mr. Creed, I recognize your phone number. What do you want answered today? Anyway, the one I chose was Focal Point Coaching and Training International, and it was headed at the time by Brian Tracy. Brian was a lot more active in it, and it's grown incredible. I've been, I think, 18 years now,
wow.
And that's hard. Not a lot of people have been in franchising that long, but I love it. And I also tell people when they're looking at franchise, always look at the support mechanism they provide.
Right.
Because I know franchises that don't offer much support.
Right.
And one thing I loved about Focal Point, it offers so much support for the coach once you make the investment. But that's how I got to Focal Point. I made the decision then because Focal Point won on all 14 questions. I won't say the name of the other company, but they won on all 14. And they were things like, so if your listeners are interested, they were things like, if I'm buying a brand, what does it represent? What is it? What kind of training do you have? What kind of training do you have ongoing after I spend the money? What kind of support do you have? What kind of marketing do you offer? It's all these things that'll get you moving faster.
Right.
I was pretty adept in a lot of those, but the things that the franchise gave me was I moved faster.
Right.
Instead of taking 6 months to roll out and do all my own stuff, I had that support. So I could go out and do what I was best at, and that was sell.
Yeah.
And I
no,
did
you're
real
right.
well.
It's the I always feel like it's when you start something from scratch, and like you certainly know this better than most with 15 of them, it's all about figuring out as fast as you can what mistake did you make and how do you fix it. Whereas the franchise has already figured out the mistakes and how to fix it. It's just how many times are you going to make the mistake they told? It's like the parent-child, don't touch the stove, it's hot. Well, the smart kid's going to touch it once and not going back. That's the really smart franchise owner is actually dumb, and they don't think, they just follow the plan, right?
Yeah.
And I'm being a little facetious with that, but that level of support, and you had a great understanding of what you wanted, and which is, what we talk to people all the time about is like, it's cheesy, but what do you want to be when you grow up? And what do you want to get out of bed and go do every day? Then that'll match you with the right franchise. And you're spot on. There are some, like Focal Point, amazing support, top to bottom. They're everywhere. They've thought of everything. There's some with a little less. Well, somebody might be more comfortable with one that has a little bit less. And that's okay too, but you just have to really understand what you want. So you ask all those questions, you get started. Did Like, I mean, you've been there for doing this for 18 years, so I'm guessing it has certainly met or exceeded your expectations. But can you think back to the beginning and what were some things that were some challenges or struggles as you were getting this off the ground?
Well, this will sound a little weird, but I didn't have a lot of struggles because I mean, from the standpoint of I was an entrepreneur. I came from an entrepreneurial background, so I understood. Second richest man in the world told me one time. I asked him what his mindset is, and he didn't even take a deep breath. He goes, one, protect your money. So even when they were a multi-billion-dollar company, he goes, we treat it just like we did on our first day of business. We're always tracking. We have metrics. We know when we're doing stuff. Number two, he goes, you've got to believe that tomorrow, when you wake up in the morning, you could be broke. So what are you doing today to protect that?
Right.
And so my mindset was always, and I find a lot of particularly franchisees that I work with, and I work with a lot of them as a coach, that they don't honestly do. They don't have a good work ethic. Right. They don't get up and go, no matter where you're at, I'm going to go out. I mean, I'd get up every morning, go say, honey, I'm going to work. And I'd go upstairs to my desk and I would get after it. But it was that mindset that I could be broke tomorrow. So what am I doing today to prevent that?
Yeah.
I always had good goals. So, some of my struggles more than anything were just, I knew how to sell. So my struggle was learning how to coach. And that's where the support mechanism of Focal Point came into play. So you have to learn, I call it size, shape, and color. I knew how to get clients. I just need to learn the size, shape, and color of what I needed to talk to them about. And as it turned out, I learned, I already was doing some of those things. And that's what a lot of people have to remember, that, this isn't you're not buying a job, you're buying a business. And if you've ever been around that, if your heart is beating, I'm sure you know how to talk to people. Whatever you're doing, whether you're selling sandwiches or coaching, right? No matter what the franchise is, you still have to deal with people and you have to talk to the people. I talked to a franchisee one time that was a client, and he was struggling. And I go, just one day, I just said, why do you think you're struggling? I've got some ideas, but why do you think? And he had a business that required him to be face-to-face, nose-to-nose with people. He goes, well, I think I know. And I go, well, why? Tell me. He goes, I don't like people. And I said, are you kidding? You just spent $100,000 on an investment that requires you to like people. I said, I think our coaching ought to be focused on how do we sell your business,
right?
rather than be in it. But I think the struggles, for me, it was just learning how to coach, and as it turned out, I was pretty good at that.
Hey everyone, I wanted to take a quick break from our podcast to tell you about our amazing friends at Entrepreneur. If you're looking to become a franchisee or simply learn more about business ownership, and guys, let's be honest, you're listening to the Franchising 101 podcast, so we know you have some interest in this. And I really encourage you to go to entrepreneur.com to check out all of their great content and resources. Seriously, Entrepreneur has everything, all the way from a bookstore to the best podcasts, webinars, and videos, plus information on upcoming events and the latest articles that seriously, they cover all aspects of franchising and business ownership. If you're having trouble deciding which franchise is right for you, start with Entrepreneur's renowned Franchise 500 ranking, which highlights the best franchises of 2022. For 45 years and counting now, Entrepreneur has been and continues to be the most widely recognized and respected authority in the franchise market. Digital and print subscriptions are available, so you never miss out on anything. So seriously, what are you waiting for? Go to entrepreneur.com right now and learn more.
If I may say this, Tim, I think one of the things I always suggest to people I work with, clients, franchise people, is this. If you come into this, don't ever forget that if you spent 30 years in corporate or 30 years doing something else, don't ever not respect your past.
Right.
Because you can say, well, this is new and I'm going to struggle learning it. Well, yeah, but you're learning size, shape, and color. You've got 30 years of experience of some sort of how to deal with people, how to talk to people, how to problem solve, all the things that goes into owning a business. And the people I see struggling the most are the people who don't honor their past and everything they've learned from the past.
Right.
So anyway, for me,
good
it was
and
just,
bad, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Both sides.
All the things that happened where they screwed up, wanted you to learn. My grandfather used to say, it's not a screw up unless you didn't learn anything from it.
Correct. Right.
So it's just understanding that you got to pass there.
Yeah. Well, and you threw out the thing about you can sell, weren't quite sure how to coach, so I needed the support there. And I think that's always, there may be somebody out there listening going, man, I can't sell like that, dude. Well, great. What are you good at? Right. It's not necessarily buying a job, you're buying the business, but within that business, you have a job. So what are you good at? What do you want to, you're the boss, man. Like, do what you do best, hire for the rest, which I'm totally stealing from somebody else in franchising, but he's probably not listening. So I'm going to say I came up with that. Right. But it really is. And having that awareness for this is huge. My wife and I, our podcast, the first podcast of the year, she was the guest, and we were talking through some things, and we kind of ended up accidentally joking that 2025 is the year of awareness, right? Just like, can we be aware of the person next to us? Can we be aware of, like, I'm talking on the speakerphone out in public, please stop that, people, right? Is it aware of what I am good at, what I want to do, what I don't like? I like how you talk about looking at that business, and people don't think about this with the franchise, kind of the end in mind, right? Like your startups, we're gonna start it, we're gonna get it up, and we're gonna sell it, right? That could be in a year, that could be in 20 years, but you don't get to do that with your job in the corporate world, right? Like you're not selling that position to the next person, and you've seen that over and over, both with your startup experience, but with your clients as a focal point coach, helping them build it up, helping them. What's that dream goal at the end, and then working towards it, which is fantastic. But I'm sure you talk to owners, business owners, franchisors, not all the time about that end and kind of what they want, and help them form that plan. Correct? Yeah,
that's what they don't expect, because in the first couple of conversations I have with any new client, I say, what's your exit plan? Well, I don't plan to. Well, that's okay, but because if we set one and then hit it, you don't have to sell it. You can just keep rocking. But there's about 9 different ways that you can sell a company. There's probably more than that, but there's ways to keep revenue streams and that kind of thing that I work with. But we need that as a goal factor for growth. What's going to drive us? It's not going to be, I've got a job, or will I screw it up? That's not it. You want to leave something for your kids. You want to take your grandkids, to show them the building. Do you want to sell it in 5 years and go to Hawaii? I don't know, but you've got to have that in sight as a driving force for why you're doing it. Right. Because otherwise, why are you doing it? Yeah, absolutely. And again, you mentioned something, if I may, if they don't know how to sell, that's really good point you made about what are you good at, because you can find people to help you with that. But let me also just interject that in today's digital world, the reason I've done so well, I think, is that I understand how selling has changed, but that's part of my life and I teach it. Right. But selling anymore is not making a pitch. We were talking about that a little bit later. Selling is listening, understanding the customer's needs, whether you're selling sandwiches or coaching. What are their needs? How can the lost art in worldwide business? I've worked with clients in 18 countries. Lost art is listening. So if you just act like you're listening,
Wait a minute, I wasn't listening. What'd you say? You said what was that again?
I knew you were going to do that. Your customer will tell you how to deal with them, what they
Yes.
want.
Yep.
But it's having a great conversation, not having a pitch.
Yeah.
And I tell every customer, I don't mind. I tell every prospect I talk to, I say, I'm not right for everybody. So let's talk about your needs.
Right.
And if I can help you with them and we can grow with that, great. If I can't, hey, I've got a new friend.
Right.
You know, but selling isn't as hard as they make it out to be because you're thinking of selling from the past.
Right. Or they're thinking, I got to go door to door to it's I always like, even the people that don't have sales experience is, okay, well, if you're standing in line at lunch and I'm right behind you and I notice your shirt that says the logo of whatever, and I ask you, hey, I saw, hey there, sir, I see your shirt says Focal Point Coaching. What is that? I'm like, are you going to turn to me and go, leave me alone? Or are you going to answer the question about your business? Like, well, no, I'm going to answer the question. That's what can you do that? Oh yeah, I can do that. Like, nobody's asking you to go door to door.
I'll tell you how biased I am. I wrote a book, and this is a cheap pitch, but I wrote a book called Champions Never Make Cold Calls.
Hold on. You said you don't pitch. Unless it's your book. Okay, never mind. Go ahead.
It's a cheap way to share with you that I wrote this book, Champions Never Make Cold Calls. But I think it's dead. It's a lot. There are people still say you can, but people don't want it. They don't need it. You know why? Because they've got a cell phone and it's instant information. So you got to have conversations with people. And it's so unusual right now. I mean, again, whether you're selling sandwiches or whatever, I would much rather go to a restaurant that says, hey, welcome in. How you doing? What do you need today? Can I make a recommendation? I'd rather do that than somebody going, here's a hero.
Right.
Well, I don't want one of those today.
Right.
Things have changed a lot, particularly since COVID 2020. It's changed a lot. I've done a lot of research in it. But if people are passionate about wanting to do something, then you'll figure out a way to do it. Would you agree?
Yeah. It's our set of 3 letters, right? So we always talk about FSO, figure stuff out. And you have a PhD in, what was that again?
GSD. Yes. Over the years, I've earned a PhD from GSDU.
Right. Which is
Stuff Done University. And it's on my business cards. It's on my, but I believe that. I believe a lot of people in business think, or buy a franchise, they go, well, I'm going to get rich now.
Right.
And you still have to, I ask a lot of people looking at franchising, are you willing to work as hard as you did 20 years ago or 10 years ago? Are you willing to do that? Because that's what it's going to take. You're building a business, but it's yours. And there's all kinds of cool things that come from that. Freedom and money and raises if you want to give yourself one, and growth and control of your life. There's all those things tied to it. But it's been perfect for me. And it's, like that guy in Saturday Night Live said, business coaching has been very, very good to me, but I've worked really hard. A lot of people don't understand how hard I've worked but I did have a goal. I had a vision of where I wanted to go and be and what I wanted and what it would take to get there.
Right.
And again, I look at my franchise, I look at Focal Point as that providing that support mechanism that I needed.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty aggressive and I needed that support. I wanted to be on my own, but I didn't want to be alone.
Right. Yep. It's the X factor in the success, and success is relative, right? And I think Focal Point's a great example of, there are some that are absolutely making gobs of money, tons of clients. There are some that maybe have 4 or 5 clients, but they're happy, they're hitting their goals, right? And so success is relative, but it's understanding that it's going to take hard work. It's not the franchise. The X factor is you as that owner to like follow the plan and then put forth the effort. And if you're not where you need to be, I can bet you 99 times out of 100, look in the mirror and we've got the answer for why you're not quite there, right?
Amen.
And so the franchises are there to support you and to help you. My wife and I always talk about this all the time because she's been on the franchisor side. I'm like, franchise is going to, and she starts to kind of cringe. I'm like, help, not do. It's not, if they were doing everything for you, guess what, people? They don't need you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're there to help you succeed and get to what you want. So
yes, sir.
When you look at all the business you've been around and owners that you've coached, this is maybe a little bit of a loaded question. Is there one thing in particular you run across that like, hey, this is what's like the most common roadblock for someone to kind of hit those goals that they have?
Yeah. Work ethic.
Okay.
It's pretty simple. I mean, in coaching, I mean, some coaches, and I'm not saying just in Focal Point, because there's lots of people who call themselves a coach out there that aren't certified in what we do. But in coaching in general, I mean, I believe there's three kinds of coaching. The one who has, I'm gonna dominate the world. I'm gonna be great. I'm gonna have every minute of every day packed with clients. That's what good looks like to me. And I'm gonna make this much, and I'm gonna rock and roll. Then the second one is the one who knows exactly what they want. It might be $70,000. That's what they want, but that's good. That looks good. When they achieve that, yes, I've done it. But they know exactly what they want. Third kind is the one that has no idea what they want. So they go out, and after a while, they're not making the money they want or doesn't have the freedom they want. And so they blame me. They blame you. They blame the Channel 7 weather guy. Right. They blame the governor. They blame the president and Congress, but they don't blame themselves.
Right.
In almost every case, particularly like with coaches, because I'm very close to the sales side of that, you know, they're wondering why they're not more successful, and they ask 2 prospects a month to buy.
Right.
Well, when I started, I averaged 7 a week. You know, I averaged 180 some presentations a year where I'm talking to clients, asking them, say it makes sense, let's buy. Where others were making, 40 of those meetings and wondering why they didn't do better. It's a work ethic that sometimes comes from being in corporate too long and not understanding the entrepreneur side. Right. Some of it is just laziness. They just didn't understand. It was the old thing. It's that, it's like the 10X rule. If you've ever read Grant Cardone stuff, he said, think about what you want and how long it's going to take to get there and how much money it's going to take, and then 10X it. Because that's probably what the reality is going to be, So, and I would tell you that if you ask me 100 more times, it's usually lack of effort of making that commitment. And just give you a quick example, I had one person I was working with, and they told me, they said, well, December is usually a slow time in this industry, so we're going to kind of take it off. And I go, that's a bunch of BS. I said, we're going to assume that it's your best month of the year. Well, okay, whatever. Anyway, it's a very small company that I can work with from that. But they were doing about, they were averaging about 1,000, 1,200 a month trying to get started. In 6 months, we finished the year. Last year, they did 60,000, I think. Well, it's a little more. They did 60,000 for the year. This year, last week, we finished at 170,000. Nice. And in December was their second biggest year of the year. Yeah. And they said it wasn't supposed to be. So it's again, I might be broke tomorrow, so what did I do today to make that happen? Yeah. And if you don't want to work much in December, just say you don't want to work much in December. That's okay. Don't arbitrarily say that is okay. That is okay. Tell me, don't make up stuff, or don't tell me you're not hitting your goals because you decided to take December off. Right. Okay, exactly. Take December off, but do it for the right reasons.
Yeah. And I think there's one of the most important questions we ask people, and I think it ties into something. First time you and I spoke, you asked a question and it really stuck with me. And so for us, it's like, why the heck are we even looking at this? Right? Like we got to figure out which is the best one, and we're going to help you do that. But why? Because when things get hard, you got to come back to the why, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And then you ask a question like, and hopefully I'm getting this correct. But what does good look like?
Yeah.
Right. And so, but if like I know my why, but if I can't define good, and you asked me that question, and it is stuck in my head. I'm like, oh hell, hope he doesn't ask that again because I'm still not sure I got a good answer for it, right? And so I think those two go. I mean, and maybe the work ethic is we're lazy. Maybe we just get stuck. But if we can go back to our why, and then what does good look like? Because you may be hitting it and going, pat yourself on the back, man. We don't celebrate our wins nearly enough. But if you're not there, then how do we fix that? So I love that question. And I wanted to be able to kind of share that with people because we talk about the why all the time, but I'm 1,000% stealing what does good look like also.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And if you like, I'll send you the formula. I created the formula a number of years ago, and when we were doing startups, and then when I was working with small companies, also multi-billion-dollar companies, but a lot of them don't know. And I asked that, and that can, for a coach, if any coaches are listening, for a coach, that could turn into 2-3 months worth of coaching, helping them understand. Because what does good look like? I just used it the other day. I have a long-term client. My clients stay with me a very long time, and they were disciplining somebody. And I said, well, okay, before you go do that, does that BP understand what good looks like from you? Well, why is that important? I go, how can you even discipline somebody if you don't know what good looks like? That means you're holding a club over their head and using it for negative purposes. But you can't discipline anybody. You can't have a consequence until you know what good looks like. And a consequence could be good. Hey, great job, Tim. Or it could be bad. You're fired.
Right.
But you can't do either one of those unless you know. And a consequence could be, what good looks like could be a metric of some sort. It could be hitting goals. It could be attitude. It could be a lot of different things. But I created a formula, and we just sat and go over it. And I've done as much as, like I said, 60 days of coaching, just understanding what good looks like. And in some cases, we've actually saved companies millions of dollars because they were firing people for reasons that nobody understood other than the person who fired them, And we understood that. And we even went as far, I have a company in Los Angeles I work with. We even went as far as to, for every job description in their company, we created a what does good look like metric.
Nice. And I like it.
So HR took it, and it's really became a pretty good deal for us.
I'm gonna create that for my 11-year-old. See how that works.
Well, actually, that works, and I can't talk a lot about it, but I've used it. I've worked with drug rehab, alcohol rehab, and it works really well because that whole what does good look like really comes along a lot of the lines of 12-step programs. So
yeah, I like it. Danny, last thing I want to throw at you, and I appreciate all of your time. I know how super busy you are, but people listening, all 7 or 8 that usually catch our wonderful Franchising 101 podcast are thinking about franchise ownership for some ridiculous reason. They haven't reached out to us yet, which shame on them. But what would you tell somebody that's maybe thinking about looking at a franchise or taking this route? Any advice that you would give them?
Yeah, you've already answered it. Number one, one of them, why do you want to look at it? What's your real purpose? Rather than go, hey, it sounds fun, or hey, I've had a friend that got rich, or why do you want to, how am I willing to put the effort in? Particularly if you've not been an entrepreneur, if you've been in corporate or thing, are you willing to put the effort in? Because there's a lot of work. And have you looked at the pluses and minuses for you?
Yeah.
But it understands, let's come back to number 2. It's going to take some work.
Yes.
But if you concentrate on it and you're passionate about it, we don't have time to talk about it today, but I've done research and I've come up with 8 what I call triggers of why people do anything today, emotional triggers. And, you've got to be willing to have a positive vocabulary. You've got to be willing to see good versus negative. You've got to understand what does good look like. So you have to have clarity. You have to have all these things. So just be sure before you start looking at 3 options or whatever, when you go out there, just be sure you understand. You don't have to know what you want to buy into, but understand why you're even looking, why you're even taking, Tim's time.
Yep.
And that's really important. And that's my own personal experience, as well as all the franchise people I've worked with over the last 17 years.
I love it. And just for those in the back, one more time, do you have to work hard or not? I'm confused.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to, but don't come bitching to us when it doesn't go well.
Yeah, you've got, particularly at the start. I mean, I've always said, if you've been around sales, they always talk about the sales funnel. It's not hard to fill the sales funnel. That's with leads and possibilities and connection. It's not hard to fill the funnel. It's hard to keep the funnel full.
Yes.
And you have to work at that. Now, with that, you can say, I'm going to take every Friday off and I'm going to go fishing and take my wife to lunch and I'm going to go for long walks and read, books and go watch bad movies. You can do that if you have a good franchise and you're ready, but understand it takes work. It takes a work ethic and it takes focus, and you've got to be able to manage the ups and downs. I've been criticized sometimes that I don't get as excited as people think I should be, but I get real excited, but I try to keep it even there because there are going to be some lows, but I've learned to just walk through the walls with a smile. And the old adage, I'm one no closer to a yes.
Correct.
You have to be willing to take that because that's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Dan, thanks so much, man, for coming on and chatting. And I'm very thankful we were, after all these years, able to finally connect. And
You bet.
I greatly appreciate you coming on and talking to us today.
Thank you. Let's do it again.
Well, let's do it. Thank you, sir. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks again to Dan Creed from Focal Point. Again, just an incredibly successful entrepreneur and franchise owner. So I thank him so much for joining us to share his journey. Thanks to all of our loyal listeners who do tune in. To reach us, francoach.net, franchising101podcast.net. There's never any fee for our service. So we want to figure out, what's your why? What does good look like for you? And ultimately, that best franchise, we're here to help you. Also, don't forget, follow us on all our social media stuff if you haven't. And our TV show, Friday, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on Biz TV with my wonderful co-host and better half, Danielle Wright. Tomorrow, we're actually diving into things we talked about here in the past a little bit, but validation calls, both from our standpoint, and Danielle definitely always talks about things from a franchisor standpoint. So tune into that. In the meantime, we'll see you next week here on the Franchising 101 podcast. Thanks so much.